Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson FX GTS Sport Glide.
All right, hey guys, welcome out to another podcast. Laidlaw's Harley-Davidson here, sitting here with Keith Hurt.
What's up, Matt? What's up?
What's going on, man? He's got some pretty good stuff. Topic of oil today, which I know is a hot topic among Harley-Davidson enthusiasts. So he's got some pretty good intel and information to share with us today.
As I was checking out the comments from the first podcast, thanks for everybody that listened and made some good comments. I responded to a few people that had some specific requests, but it seemed like an overwhelming topic was oil. So figured I'd pick that for number 2. And it's a pretty broad topic, and there's a lot of information out there. So I'll probably go a little long, but we'll try to keep it to the pertinent stuff.
Yeah, right on. And I'm going to share just a little bit of news as well, kind of some industry news and what this model year is going to look like moving forward in the face of the coronavirus that we're going through right now and the corona economy or whatever you want to call it right now. So, I'll start off. So some big news yesterday. So a lot of you know that the former CEO, Matt Levatich, who I think served for maybe 5 or 6 or more years as the CEO of Harley-Davidson, stepped down earlier this year, either January or February. And one of the board members, Johann Zeitz, who is of German descent, he was on the board since 2007. He was the acting CEO after Matt Levatich stepped down. And just yesterday, they basically announced that Johann is going to be the permanent CEO. Yeah, kind of a big shift in leadership there. He's got some, I think a little bit different direction, kind of tweaking things a little bit more. I think he's putting a little bit more emphasis on really what the core customer of Harley-Davidson wants and what kind of made Harley-Davidson for so many years now. And, kind of focus a little bit more on what we feel like the U.S. market is looking for from Harley-Davidson. But he also has mentioned, too, he's not going to abandon the More Roads initiative that Matt Levatich put out there. And the More Roads initiative, if you're not familiar with it, was introducing some of these new segments of bikes, like getting into classes or segments of motorcycles that Harley-Davidson hasn't done before. Like you got your Livewire that launched this year, which is obviously completely different than what Harley-Davidson's done in the past. And then you've got the Bronx, which is a street fighter, and then you've got the Pan America, which is an adventure touring bike.
Yeah, so I know there's a lot of excitement around those 2 models. We got to see some of them at the EICMA show last year, and for us in the technical world too, it's a big shift. The engine design is completely new, and it's something new, and that excites us because we get to learn about something that we don't already have experience with. And so, like the current platform, M8's been out for a few years. We pretty much know what's going on with all that stuff. So as technicians, we get excited about these new models. The Livewire too, that's all new to us. And
is it excitement or is it some grumblings that now they have to learn a bunch of new stuff?
No, man. I mean, I'm sure in some shops, there's some grumblings, but honestly, our guys are real excited about it, and we talk about it quite a bit. Some of our sales guys like Nick and those guys are real, pumped up on, especially the Pan America, and that's a big riding segment out there that Harley's not in right now. And they're doing a good job, I think, of incorporating the technology that's available and trying to make the best vehicle that they can put forward when they actually come out with it. And, for us, there's a lot going on there. It's a new engine, new frame, all new suspension technology, stuff that we don't normally see. And I'm
you're learning a brand new animal, basically.
Yeah, everything. I mean, and, riding it's one thing, but actually, working on it and having the knowledge to do it. So I'm sure there's going to be some update schools coming up, and we're going to send some people away to training. But yeah, we're excited to see ride those bikes and, really get a feel for them. And, but yeah, that's going to be neat this year when we finally see those. The Livewire has been fun. I mean, personally, I really love that bike. I've ridden several of them now, and just the power delivery, it's amazing. And yeah, it's a different experience, but yeah, it's real technical, and there's a lot going on. I've interfaced a lot with the factory guys and, kind of worked on some of them, and yeah, it's been fun. So, but yeah, the Pan America, I think, is one that most people are talking about the most because it's most far removed from what Harley normally does.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, the Livewire has been really cool. You take everything objective about the Livewire and the pros and cons of everything, and everyone says everything about the Livewire is great. There's very few gripes about it, except for the price. When it gets to the price, that's kind of where, the buck stops, so to speak, for a lot of people. But Yeah, I'm sure Harley-Davidson will come out with electric bikes in the future that hit a lower price point for people that are looking to get into the electric vehicle world but don't have the pocketbook.
I would tell people, like I tell a lot of people, if you're in that arena or you want to be in that arena, before you count it out, I know the price tag's kind of steep, but before you count it out, come down and ride one. I mean, I know they're doing, they have a test ride initiative going on with those now, and like for me, when I got on it, and rode it, I immediately was like, whoa, man, this is a whole different thing. Like it's totally, opposite of what you're used to riding. So but it's a lot of fun. Like it took, fun is like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's the funnest motorcycle to ride. Like even on the freeway around town, I mean, it has instant power right now, and so like customizable, to the customer as far as the power delivery goes, and
easy to ride too, like relatively speaking.
Yeah.
No shifting the gears or clutch or any of that stuff. Like
that threw me because I've got a lot of miles on a lot of bikes, and just not having to pull in the clutch or kick in the gear. I still find myself when I come back to the dealership from a test ride on one looking for the gear shifter. It's just a habit, but
and some guys like the aspect of shifting gears in the clutch, and I definitely do. Of course, I can appreciate getting on an electric bike and enjoying it for what it is, but a lot of guys, they like that aspect of riding. Like to them, shifting the gears and using the clutch, that is part of riding a motorcycle. So
yeah, there's something to be said for that, I guess, if you're that old school. But yeah, it's definitely an experience. So I would encourage anyone that's like even passively interested, ride one, get on one, go on test ride, and give feedback. Tell what you think. I mean, the thing that amazed me the most about that bike, besides the power, is the suspension. Like they have the new, it's new to Harley, but the big piston show a fork on the front, and it's three-way adjustable, as well as the shocks in the back, the mono shock in the back. But it soaks up anything you can throw at it so well. It's a kind of a departure from what we're normally used to, like on a stock vehicle. It definitely has a great suspension, and once you get dialed in, it's probably even better. I mean, this is unadjusted, just me jumping on it and riding it.
Yeah, very cool. Well, as part of I mentioned the More Roads Initiative, those two bikes, the Bronx and the adventure touring bike, the Pan America, they were slated to come out this year in the dealer announcement meeting. And typically speaking, the dealer announcement meeting is the end of August. And because of this whole COVID situation, that's all been delayed now. So, for those of you who follow Harley-Davidson closely, you can expect to not see the new 2021 model years in the summer this year. So that's all been delayed till January or February. I've been getting a lot of questions about that because there's a lot of rumors going on about that, and it is true. So we're going to be seeing the 2020 model year run through the rest of the calendar year, all the way till about January time, like I mentioned, and then January, February, we can expect to see those two bikes, the Bronx and the Pan America.
Yeah, that's gonna be a weird one for me too. I mean, my whole career with Harley, August was when the new bikes came, and there was a lull in July of getting bike shipments, and the timing of it's a little bit odd, but it didn't. I think it coincides more with what you would think a model year would be. It always, when I got into this industry, I was surprised to find out that in the car automotive world altogether, the new models come out, and the car guys have been moving it up and up and up. I mean, I think some of them were bringing out their new models in like January and February for the following year.
Yeah, it's like a year in advance almost. Yeah, it's getting kind of crazy.
It struck me as odd because as growing up, I always thought, it's 2000, whatever, and the 2000 whatevers are out. Yeah. But the fact that they actually bring them out early surprised me. And Harley was one of the later, like as a big manufacturers go, I think they're one of the ones later in the year. I think it's going to be a difference, but I think it's going to maybe be a good difference where it's, a little more, it's better for Harley because they're going to ramp down production in the winter time, when traditionally, besides here, we enjoy a great long riding season, but the rest of the country's pretty, stagnant as far as riders go, and people are kind of sitting at home checking things out.
Well, and that's one of the things they said too, was they felt like with this model launch timing, it was more in line with the beginning of the riding season. And so they may actually permanently switch the timing. I don't know if they'll ever go back to August. I don't know. We don't really have that information at this point in time, but to kind of for most parts of the country, well, a lot of the parts of the country where it's colder, you launch the bikes and you got 1 or 2 months of riding, and then the snow comes and it's kind of like a buzzkill. And you got these new bikes, you want to roll them out the door, and no one's buying because it's snow on the ground. So maybe it's better timing now. I don't know. We'll see. But let's turn the time over to you now. You can talk a little bit about oil, Keith.
Yeah, so this is a big topic. A lot of people were asking questions in the comments, and we get into these discussions quite a bit. So I figured we'd talk about oil, and Matt, if something comes up that I'm talking about, and you got a question you want to throw at me, go for it. But before I start, I just wanted to tell everyone, like, this is my own opinion. This is my opinion based on my 20 plus years of experience as a service manager, and what I've seen when we take these engines apart and when we diagnose issues. And so, like, it might not necessarily agree with what you think or what Harley thinks or whatever, but that's kind of, my disclaimer on what I'm about to tell you about. And before I start, I just want to, tell everyone, like, you can go as deep as you want on this subject. Everybody has an opinion about it. Normally their opinion is based on something that someone told them. Like, my personal opinion on oil was originally based on what my father brought me up on, which was Pennzoil. And, he only swore by Pennzoil. He always used Pennzoil in all of our vehicles at home and stuff. And I did too for a long time. But, to sidebar a little, my first vehicle I bought was a 1992 Chevy S10. And one of the reasons I bought it was because the guy said those words, like, hey, I've only used a Pennzoil in it ever. And I was like, oh, cool, man. That's what my dad uses too. Awesome. Bought this truck, had it like a year, blew out a main bearing in the thing. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? So, like, being, mechanical and mechanically interested at the time, I'm like, oh, I can, diagnose and fix this. So I ended up taking the engine apart. Well, right when I removed the rocker cover, I realized that we got a problem. There's a bunch of sludge in here. So, like, that's only caused by oil, right? So my point is, like, that was my opinion up to that point. Now my experience at that point told me, like, hey, Pennzoil is not the one to be using, man. That's a mess. So up until that point, my experience was based on my father's experience and what he had told me. I trusted him, and he didn't know any different. But, you're talking about the early 90s, like probably like 1990, 1991. And technology's progressed a lot since then. But, yeah, at that time, I realized right away, like, hey, oil's everything. And, don't just take someone's word for it, and you got to get educated and learn on your own. So, that was my kind of intro story. What I would tell you is, if you want to learn more about oil, and then we'll link these two documents or websites into the podcast. The most substantial one was, and it's a little old. It's from 2009. It was done by AMSOIL. But it's the only motorcycle-specific oil study that's so in-depth that I'm aware of. And I've read it before, and just preparing for this, I reread it. There is a bunch of information in there, and the tests they do are super legit. And they tested, like, I want to say they have two different categories, but the category relating to Harley is like 50 multi-viscosity, 50-weight oil. And they test both Syn 3 and Harley-Davidson 360 at the time, and then a bunch of other oils, Maxima. I can't even name them all right now, but there's a bunch. And of course, at the end they sum it all up. They do a good job. They did a really good job, and they explain why they're doing the tests and what tests they're doing and what's going to reveal. Then they give you the results, and at the end they have this rating scale of how the oils performed in all these different categories.
Theirs is the best, right?
Yeah, no surprise. AMSOIL's at the top, but I thought about that too, and I was like, looking at, how could they have swayed, these were done by, I think 5 different independent laboratories, the same test. So how could they have, they were paying for it obviously, but so they could have swayed it somehow, I'm sure. But there's the way they describe the test is so specific, they couldn't have, they could have engineered their oil to perform better in those tests, but I don't see how they could have fixed the results, and still be, above board. And they actually have an affidavit in the last page of it signed by the testing company that did the testing that's non-affiliated with AMSOIL, an official document saying, hey, these I certify. It's like a scientist guy. I don't remember his name, but he signed it, certifying that he's who he is and that these tests were done that way. Yeah, so they got a third party involved.
So it'd be non-biased.
Yeah. So I point that out only because it is the most comprehensive one. These tests are expensive to do, and I don't know of anyone who's doing one currently, but maybe someone out there is going to redo it because it's 11 years old now. So all technology, including oil technologies, substantially increased in the past decade. So maybe someone out there will do it, but it's expensive, especially to test all that oil and see what happens. So. The other thing is, and the other article is from RevZilla. It's from 2016, a little more recent. the reason I point that out is, and it's a little more simple. It's if you're not a techie guy and you don't want to get deep into what these tests mean and all this stuff, it's a real simple breakdown of, hey, here's what oil does, here's why you need it, here's, what we would recommend. And RevZilla is a website. They sell tons of different oils. So it's kind of like, more of a layman's version of like, hey, here's 2 bits about oil, and like, here's, read it and form your own opinion pretty much. But, yeah, so there's that. So we can go into, I figured I would discuss a few things, like, my number one tip is, and hopefully it's no surprise, but check your oil and check it often. Like, if you don't listen to anything else I say, tune out at this point or whatever, check your oil. Just go out to your bike right now and check it, put it on pause or whatever. That's the one thing that a lot of people don't do.
So what are people checking for when they check their oil? I mean, like level, the color, going
yeah,
into that a little bit.
Level is the most important. Does the oil full? It's, depending on your model and year, most, for Harleys anyways, for the last, as far as I can remember, they're all on the side stand. So on the side stand, hot is when you should really check it. So you want to warm up your bike. Maybe if you can go for, a quick ride or whatever, get it warm. Harley's officially says that warm temperature on engine oil is 185 or better. It takes, probably 10 minutes of riding to get to that temperature. Not hard riding, but just, regular street riding. So yeah, and then certain models, in the past, Sportsters and some Softails like early twin cams and late Evos, it's on the vehicle upright, so you got to kick it off the side stand and pull the dipstick. So generally, as a rule, like if your dipstick swivels, it's normally on the side stand. If your dipstick's straight and doesn't move, then normally the bike will be upright. Now on the late model bikes, the dipstick's straight, but it has 2 marks on it. There's a hot mark and a cold mark. So you want to be, in between there. It gives you the option of checking it cold too. So the reason behind that is as the oil heats up, it expands obviously. So it gets the volume, basically it grows in the reservoir. So you want to check it hot. Also look at the condition of it. If it's got a lot of bubbles on it and stuff like that, then the anti-foaming properties have worn out on it. The viscosity might be suspect a little bit. So, Harley-Davidson service intervals every 5,000 miles. So, I would, be checking for that too. But
so before you move on too long, about the studies that you mentioned. So what are the findings in those studies that you found were like the most interesting? Like what's kind of the takeaway information kind of for the listeners, and like where did Harley-Davidson oils rank? Should they be using Harley oils? Should they be using aftermarket oils like AMS oil? Like what oil should people be using?
That's the most important question. That's the question everyone asks.
Okay, so I probably jumping to the top.
Yeah, no problem, man. Let's get into it. So as far as to answer your question, the Harley-Davidson Sin 3 oil, I think it ranked like number 5 out of 18. I want to say the big number is 18. It might be 16. Anyways, it was like number 5, and HE360 oil was like a solid like 12. And that brings up a good point, because when you look at that graph,
the HE360 was a solid 12. You said,
yeah,
that's
like 12.
That's another Harley oil, like
correct.
The regular
that's the
non-synthetic.
HD. Yeah, correct. Harley offers, as most manufacturers do, they offer a standard oil, like HE360 is their standard regular oil. They offer a synthetic blend, semi-synthetic. My opinion on that is that nobody buys 89 octane gasoline anymore, right? So there's always 3 octanes at the pump. You got 91, 89, and 87. Everyone's either on the cheap end with the 87 or on the high end with the 92. No one buys that mid-grade fuel. So like no one buys mid-grade oil. I don't think we sell very much of it at all. I don't know really why you would. But it's a blend between the two, like regular oil and synthetic. It's kind of a mid-grade, if you want to call it that. And then the Harley-Davidson Sin 3 is the Harley-Davidson the synthetic version of the oil. So
and that ranked about 6th, you said?
Third. Oh, no, 5th. I'm sorry. It was 5th. Okay. So
on the AMS oil test.
On the AMS oil test. So the reason behind that is like they test. So a little bit about this is actually a good segue. Motorcycle oils are not all the same. So the oils they tested are in the same category. Most motorcycles, including some Harleys like the V-Rods, the Streets, they share the engine oil, transmission oil, and primary oil all in one container. It's all inside the engine and circulates through all 3. That presents its own set of circumstances that a certain oil is engineered for that works better.
And that's the way Harleys are shipped, right? Basically with the same oil in all 3 cavities.
No, they have so a CVO, yes. So CVO uses Syn 3 in all 3 cavities. The regular Harleys, like a standard bike, everything but a CVO. They have regular oil in the engine. They have Formula Plus in the primary and the transmission. Those are specifically designed. And if you want to get down to the meat of it, what my recommendation is, don't use the same oil in all 3 cavities. An oil that's made for the engine does not perform this as well in the transmission, and there's a lot of reasons behind that. Now, everyone always asks, like, why is the gearbox oil or the transmission oil heavier? Well, the reason it's heavier is because the element chains in it are longer. Why they're longer is because the gears inside the transmission mash up those and break up those element chains in the oil. So over time, the oil in the transmission, although it stays clean because there's no combustion or contaminants going on with it, it thins out because it actually breaks up the elemental chains in the oil from, they call that shearing. So that's one of the tests on the AMSOIL test. They test for shearing. Now, it's not fair to test Harley-Davidson's engine oil against an oil that's built for multi-purpose gearbox and stuff like that, because they don't ever recommend their oil for that purpose, except for the Syn 3, right? So that's why the HD360 performed a little bit lower, because they did perform that shearing test on it, and it's not a fair comparison, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So there's there's all oils on the spectrum there in that test. They did not test Formula Plus, or at the time it would have been Harley-Davidson had semi-synthetic transmission lubricant, as well as their own different primary oil. So that back then there was 3 different oils that they offered in the regular range. They didn't test either one of those other 2, just the engine oil only. So that's kind of why, those results are, the way they are. Now, AMSOIL is one of those manufacturers that recommends their oil in all 3, cavities of the Harley-Davidson engine. So they have it engineered that way, and it works well. So that whole discussion too about synthetic versus regular is a big one that always comes up, and people that have been around this industry for a while, for years and years and years. When I got involved, Harley-Davidson said that do not use synthetic oil in our engines. And when they came out with their synthetic oil and they said, hey, you can use this one and you can use it in all 3 gearboxes, it threw everyone off. They're like, hey, for years you've said don't use this oil. Now, the reason is all these lubricant conversations go back to engine design and function, like how the engine functions, right? So as a matter of comparison, a Harley engine is, 45-degree V-twin, push rod actuated, roller bearing bottom end. That's where it all kind of comes. The roller bearings and the crankshaft is where it kind of the rubber meets the road with the oil conversation. As opposed to a car that has a plain bearing bottom end, they have a whole different requirement. So there's no rollers in the bottom of a car. The connecting rods basically have a wearable bearing on them that's bolted right around the journals on the crankshaft, where Harley has a roller, bearing there that's actually a moving piece, a mechanical piece that rolls. So it needs a little bit of that friction. So back then there was some skating of these rollers attributed to engine failures and stuff like that.
Skating of the rollers, explain that.
So the rollers, when the idea or the theory at the time was that the synthetic oil was causing the rollers not to roll, instead to just kind of stay in place. They didn't have enough friction to roll. They would slip around the crankshaft instead of roll.
Gotcha.
And it would create friction, and it would create heat and eventually bearing failure, right? So that was basically Mobil 1 was the only one in the market for synthetic oils back then. So Harley, really quickly said, hey, don't use synthetic oil, and our engines are not designed. That oil is not designed for our engines. Our engines are not designed to use that oil. Don't use it.
It's almost too slippery in a sense.
Yeah, almost too slick in a sense. Which causes Mobil 1 to kind of re-engineer their additive package and come out with a V-twin specific oil. So that's kind of the history of that. And just to briefly discuss, the main difference between regular oil and synthetic oil is the regular oil is made from crude oil stock that comes out of the ground. Your traditional oil. So they refine that, and in that process it makes gasoline and lubricants and tire rubber and all these different things. So synthetic oil is different in the manner that it's the base stock that they refine it out of is engineered in a laboratory to produce a specific result of whatever they want that oil to be, which is why it's more expensive, because there's a lot more waste in that process. So synthetic oil, they engineer a base stock, they refine it into the oil they want it to be, and then they pretty much discard the rest or find another use for it. But there's not a lot left over. So with the regular process, there's a lot of other applications for that byproduct, but with the synthetic oil, there isn't. So hence the price difference,
Gotcha.
And it's specifically designed to be what it is. But after they refine it, they put additives into it. So zinc is a big one. There's a lot of other ones. They have a lot of zinc's like an anti-wear agent. They have anti-foaming agents. They have all these different things. So like if you wanted to make your own oil, Matt Laidlaw oil, you can go to a oil refinery. There's not a ton of them like Lucas and Amsoil and Sunoco, big ones like that, and you can pay them to put whatever additives you want in that oil. The assumption is your company is going to assume the risk, and you've done your research, and you're going to actually, be the one responsible for the oil, but they're going to manufacture it for you, right? Yeah. So that's kind of that, manufacturing the side of it, and going back to like the purpose of it. So both of these articles kind of go into this, and it's a very important point, is that you should be using the oil that your engine's designed to use. So we have these questions that come up a lot. Like, my buddy says, or mix a quart of 30 weight or 40 weight or 50 weight or straight weight oil into my, 2 or 3 quarts of 2050 oil, or mix a quart of 10W30 to my, no, don't do that. That's a bad plan.
The chemistry in the garage is never really a good idea.
Yeah, your buddy's chemistry is off. Like, both of these articles, and specifically the Revzilla one, makes a great point right off the bat. You can never go wrong with the OEM manufacturer's recommended oil.
It's funny how the manufacturer knows what's best for the bikes that they build and design.
Right? Yeah.
That's how that works.
So, yeah, they make that point early, and they make it a couple times, I think, in their article. And the Amsoil one kind of comes into the summation at the end, where that actually comes up like, hey, you can never go wrong using the manufacturer's recommended oil. That's just where it's, that's the biggest takeaway from any of this stuff. Don't try to get weird with the formulations and all these different things. Just use what the manufacturer recommends. And if you check your oil often, you change your oil when you're supposed to change your oil, you can't go wrong with either one. There's significant benefits to synthetic oil, like an oil's job is threefold. It's to clean, to cool, and to lubricate. So synthetic oil does all those things better, a little bit better, actually in some cases much better than regular oil. But if you're changing your oil often, that was a popular thing when synthetics first came out. Hey, I can extend my oil life interval. That's not the reason to use it. The reason to use it is because it does those 3 things better than regular oil. Still change it when you're supposed to change it. Don't increase your service interval. It's not meant for that purpose. It's meant to do its job better than superior to the original oil. So that's kind of where it all begins and ends, with all this stuff.
Yeah. So a guy comes into, our shop, for example, he wants our best expertise on what to do. Let's say he has a twin cam or a Milwaukee 8. And he just says, what do you guys recommend? What are you gonna put in that guy's bike?
I'm gonna recommend the Harley-Davidson Syn 3 oil for the engine, and I'm gonna recommend the Formula Plus oil for the transmission and primary. If they want to, go with a better oil like in the transmission or something, Bel Ray's a good one. But I would really keep the primary oil with the Formula Plus. The friction modifiers and stuff because Harley Davidson is a wet clutch situation, and the slipperiness of the oil makes a big difference in the clutch, the way the clutch actually works. And so that's my standard recommendation. You want the best recommendation. That's it. For a lot of different reasons. Number one is it's readily available anywhere you go, right? Any Harley Davidson dealer is going to have that oil. If you're on the road and you need some, you can stop at any Harley dealer and get it. That's one. Number two is
it, just sorry to interrupt, but is it bad to okay, I'm going to do synthetic one time and then I'm going to go back to regular oil the next time. Is it bad to change the fluids around in your bike?
You can do that. That's no problem. You don't have to flush anything out or anything. That's because what I was kind of talking about earlier. In the car world, that's a no-no, and the reason why is because those plain bearings I was talking about in the engine, the oil actually it penetrates and permeates those, and it stays in the actual plain bearing design. With the roller bearing setup that Harley has, it doesn't like soak into anything. There's nothing for it to soak into. It's all metal.
So if I'm a guy who's rolling the Sin 3 in all 3 cavities and I'm listening to this podcast, I'm like, maybe I'll use the Formula Plus in my transmission and my primary. There's no problem in draining those and pouring the Formula Plus right in there?
No, there's no problem at all. Okay. Yeah, in car world, they flush the engine, cool the engine oil system, and then they switch to synthetic. You shouldn't directly mix the two together. So if you're running synthetic or Sin 3 and you're going to switch to Formula Plus, drain it all the way out and put the Formula Plus in. There's no reason to flush or anything like that. It's not going to, there's not enough oil stays in those two particular spots to, create any kind of like contamination issue. They can mix with each other on a small extent, but they say not to, pour them directly together. So yeah, that's my standard answer.
So you mentioned AMSOIL being, they had the tests. They came out on the top on their tests to be used for all 3 cavities on a Harley-Davidson. What's your opinion on AMSOIL? A guy walks through the door and says, "Hey, I want AMSOIL and everything." Like, what are you saying to that person?
If a customer asks my opinion, it's different than being like they have their own opinion formed already. Like I'm here to advise, but I'm also in customer service. If they have an opinion about something, unless it's completely detrimental to, to what we're trying to put forth, like if it's something that's like I really don't approve of, I'll, kind of like approach it like, "Hey, dude, why would you do it that way? Like this is why we recommend what we do," and try to educate. But AMSOIL, you can't. There's no harm to be made. Like if they want to do that, and that's fine. I can tell you.
A guy comes in, he has his own oil, puts it on the counter, and says, "Put this in, you guys." There's no problem.
As long as it's meant for that purpose. Yeah, as long as it's meant for that purpose, and if it's something that's totally wacky, like trying to give us 30 weight oil to put in their twin cam or whatever, we won't do that because that's going to cause some kind of damage or whatever. Right. We don't want to be responsible for that, but. If it's intended for that purpose and manufacturer of the oil says that it's good for that, then that's cool. You got an opinion about it and that's what you like, then awesome, let's do it. But that's different than a recommendation. Like, customer coming and saying, "Hey, what do you recommend?" Then I'm going to give them my recommendation. If they come in and say, "Hey, this is the oil I use and this is what I want to use," cool, man. That we're not gonna discuss it. That you have an opinion. Let's do it.
What about weather? Like, what if I live in Minnesota in the winter and I want to take my bike out, compared to, maybe Las Vegas where it gets extremely hot?
That's why modern oils are multi-viscosity, so the 20W is, basically how it performs cold or in the wintertime, and the 50 weight is how it performs hot. So there's a lot of nuance to that. It's testing the viscosities at different temperature ranges and stuff like that. So that oil, Harley's recommendation of 2050 oil is good in pretty much all climates, unless I think they have they have a recommendation of like 2050. 1030 or 1040 when the temperature is like constantly below 0 or something like that.
This is Harley-Davidson's.
Yeah, so in the owner's manual they have a little thing, but unless I don't know who's riding their bike often in 0 degree weather, which there might be some guys, I met a guy from Alaska the other day that's trying to get his bike going. That's been sitting outside in Fairbanks, Alaska for the last 6 months. I'm like, bro,
they're out there. So I was just looking for both sides of the spectrum.
I guess they're there, but like 2050 is the way to go. Like it's readily available.
So your recommendation stands regardless of whether and it's the Sin 3 and the engine.
Yeah, it's based on that. What I know, what I've experienced about oils and having the heavier oils in the transmission and the primary and the clutch being a little bit finicky with oil, and also price. Price is a big one, and both of these surveys, these reports discuss that price. There's a point in time like Harley-Davidson, oil is moderately priced compared to what's out there. There's oil that's 25. Well, there's more than that. Like my wife's car takes this transmission oil that's supposed to be lifetime oil, but if you have to change it, it's like $49 a quart. You need 3 quarts of it. It's $150 for a transmission oil. You're like, what the heck? But my point there is like it's moderate. Harley-Davidson oil is moderately priced. There's stuff that's cheaper. There's stuff that's way more expensive. Yeah. The cost benefit becomes an issue at some point. Like how. If you're changing your oil often, do you really need $25-$30 oil a
Right.
quart, like $14, $15, $16 oil a quart is gonna do just as good for you. And why? Then you don't always get what you pay for, I guess, is my
You have
point.
a disproportionate, cost versus benefit with the more expensive oil. Basically.
That oil. So Harley oil. I don't know. I didn't look at the retail price today, but I think it's like $14 or $15 for a quart of Sin 3, right? A quart of oil that costs $25 isn't going to give you 50% more protection than that quart of oil that costs 50% less. It's just the math doesn't play out. So that's why I recommend it. Its availability. It's never going to cause you a problem. It's fully warrantyable. I have seen issues where, like, especially if a customer doesn't maintain their bike well, and the warranty company will ask for maintenance records. I haven't seen them specifically deny anyone's claim based on oil alone, but lack of maintenance for sure. If the oil's burnt and nasty and old and have a failure, they're probably not going to cover that. Like it's not going to happen.
So is it safe to say because I think a large piece of this conversation is always about longevity of the engine.
Yeah.
What oil can I use to prolong my engine and deter it from the possible mechanical breakdown?
That's a good point too. So that my recommendation is also based on my observation of disassembling these bikes and for upgrades and repairs and a lot of different reasons. By and large, like the ones that have Harley Sin 3 in them, the engine components on the inside are very clean. Like especially if the customer changes it when they're supposed to, they're clean. There's no etching, there's no discoloration, there's no burning, there's no weird wear patterns, or anything like that. It's very normal wear that we see associated with internal engine and transmission components and stuff like that. I don't want to throw anyone specifically under the bus, but I have taken apart engines. Same experience that I had with Pennzoil. I've taken apart customers' engines that swore by a certain brand in the past and been like, whoa, what is going on here? It's all discolored and burned. And they'll tell you, like, I've changed my oil every 5,000 miles and I've only used this particular brand. And you look at the parts tell a story. I say that all the time. The parts tell a story. You look at the part and it's just like it's hammered, and you're like, whoa, man, don't use that oil. Mental note.
Yeah.
And then you got to have the conversation with the customer, and I invite them into the shop, like, hey, let's look at what failed in your bike and let's discuss why and how and all these things. Mm-hmm. And then they're looking at like, well, why do my parts look like that? This particular customer that I'm recollecting was like, why are my parts all yellow like that? It's like, that's your oil, my friend. Like that oil that you're so in love with, that's what caused that. So, that's an important, discussion to have too. I could name out the brand, but I don't really want to. I don't want to get.
It doesn't really matter.
I don't want to hear the negativity associated with it. But
it's funny because I think just as much as people are brand loyal to certain makes of motorcycles, people are very brand loyal to oil. Some like the gearheads and guys that are really into it.
Yeah, they are.
There's some brand loyalty out there.
Yeah, and the interesting thing there is, in my experience, those guys are the guys that normally maintenance their bikes the most.
Right.
And they're most like they want to do the best they can for their bike. So that's an interesting caveat too. Like those guys that are really into that that segment are the ones that are doing the most maintenance on their bikes.
Maybe we'll have to have another topic another time, just about servicing yourself as compared to servicing at a dealer, and maybe the pros and cons of it. Maybe there's a savings there, but maybe there's a warranty risk there, if it's not done properly. So maybe might have to go into that in a future episode. But maybe you can comment on that in 2 or 3 sentences. Yeah, I mean, my quick take on that is it's okay to service your own bike. I prefer that you bring it here where we have the latest technology. We're professionals. We know what's going on. We know the service bulletins and what's up. Yeah, aside from the fact that that's our job and that's how we make money here at the dealership. Yeah, but it's okay to service your own bike, but I would recommend that if you're doing that, make sure you're buying quality oil, you're buying quality parts, you're buying proper oil filter. Oil filter is another one. Like these twin cams and Milwaukee 8s require a much higher filtration, like a 5 micron or better filtration. The reason behind that is they have piston cooling jets on the bottom of the piston. It sprays misty oil on the bottom of the piston to help cool the piston. So that orifice in the jet is just a little larger than 5 microns. So if you have like a Evo oil filter on for instance, they're 10 micron.
If your filtration is only 10 micron, you could clog that jet up. So that's the reason that filtration is important.
You gotta have the right filter. Like
you gotta have the right filter.
Get the wrong filter.
Yeah, get the right parts. If you're gonna maintenance your own bike, get the service manual, man. Like, go online at least and check it out and get yourself familiar.
The service manual is a Harley-Davidson manual that is, written and gives you a really detailed outline of how to do all the.
You don't know how many times I get the call like, "Hey, man, I pulled my oil drain plug and only a little bit of oil come out." Well, there's a plug on the bottom of the engine that's not the oil drain plug. That's not the one you pull to drain the oil. So don't pull that one. It was there for like the machine when in the original casting process they cap it off with a plug that's not supposed to be removed. So, back to what you're saying though, if you're going to maintenance your own vehicle, buy quality parts, keep your receipts, maintain your own logs. Just in case it ever comes up, you can say, "Hey, yeah, here's when but besides keeping the receipts, document the mileage. Like, hey, I changed my oil at 5,280, miles, and here's my receipt for the parts I used." That's proof, right? Yeah. So that's fine. But if you're if you're doing it at home, man, more power to you. Great, but get educated, do it the right way. You can mess things up just by doing simple oil change. Believe me, I've had it all happen. Yeah. But also, at least once in a while, come to the dealership and ask us to check your vehicle for recalls. That's one thing that gets skipped. It used to get skipped at a lot of dealers. Now, the the dealer management system does it automatically. As soon as you put a VIN number in, it comes up with if it has any recalls or not. That allows us to help you keep your bike current and safe, and we do that automatically. We also update the radio software. We update the calibrations in the ECM and stuff like that if it needs it. These things we do automatically when we service a motorcycle that you're not going to get at home unless.
Well, and not to mention all the other stuff too, Keith. I mean, I know a lot of guys say, "I service my bike." Well, it's like, well, did you adjust the steering head bearing? Did you check the belt tension? Did you
check the
critical fasteners?
Spoke tension's a big one.
There's a million. There's a million different things that people aren't doing. If they service their own bike. So get the service manual and do it right.
Yeah, and like most dealers, I think most dealers these days, like we make the statement that we meet or exceed Harley-Davidson's maintenance recommendations. For instance, spark plugs. They say your spark plugs can go 10,000 miles, right? You're supposed to inspect them at 5,000. What's the point of taking like on Milwaukee 8, for instance, what's the point of taking the gas tank all the way off, taking all 4 spark plugs out, because you have to get to the middle ones, and taking them out to look at them to put them back in?
Yeah, when spark plugs are relatively
inexpensive, right? So we replace them. And I've never had a negative byproduct of replacing some spark plugs too early.
$15-$20 and I don't want to pay for that.
Yeah, it doesn't there's no reason to look at a spark plug and put the same spark plug back in. But yeah, that's just an example of it. So that's that's a big one that comes up a lot, and that's cool. We get those calls and questions. So yeah, just a couple more. In trying to kind of bring. I know we're going a little long, so trying to bring it to an end real quick. A couple more side notes I wanted to mention about oils. Temperature is very important. The maximum temperature is what I'm referring to, which like I said earlier, synthetic oil stays in its grade longer. So like a regular oil can stay in its grade like three low 300s in temperature. A synthetic oil is like above 350, 360, 370. It'll still provide that lubricating effect. So when oil goes out of the viscosity range, it's no longer lubricating, keeping the engine parts from contacting one another.
It gets too hot.
And too thin. So that's important, and oil coolers can help that, things like that. Definitely around here, I recommend that if you live in a desert environment. Harley's has a new one now that's like a fan inducted oil cooler for the Milwaukee 8s, which is good if you're riding for long periods of time in high heat, or you're stuck in traffic in your daily commute a lot. That's a good one because it'll keep air flowing over the oil cooler and keep the oil cooler, the engine oil cooler. Oil consumption is one I wanted to mention. People have a lot of questions about oil consumption. Hey, my bike's consuming too much oil. So we try to quantify that, like how much is too much. So Harley's official statement on oil consumption is a heavyweight powertrain, meaning like a touring bike, even like the Softail is a heavyweight powertrain. They're allowed consumption of up to 1 quart of oil every 1,000 miles. That might seem like a lot, and in a car world that is a lot. But in air-cooled engine world, that's not a lot, and that's not enough to make
1 quart every 1,000 miles.
1 quart every 1,000 miles.
That seems like a lot.
So that's enough to make your dipstick read low. So that's I go back to my original, like, check your oil often. If you haven't checked your oil in 1,000 miles, you could conceivably be a quart low, and that's considered acceptable.
Because a Milwaukee 8 is like what?
Yep.
How many quarts?
Capacity wise,
Yeah,
it's
like
like 3. Well, real world, I think they stated it's like 4 something, 4. But real world, like when we change the oil, they take like 3 and some change, of real world oil.
Yeah.
So if you don't check your oil, if you haven't checked your oil in 1,000 miles, you can conceivably be a quart low and not even know. And and the less oil you have, the less it's going to clean, less it's going to cool and lubricate the engine. So
maybe if in that case, maybe top it off a little bit before you get to that 5,000 mile increment. Maybe.
Yeah, you should be checking it. I mean, I would recommend check wise. The best scenario is check it before every time you ride. I know it's sometimes unrealistic for people, but at least check it every time you fill up the gas tank. That's my kind of standard answer on when you should check your oil. While you're pumping gas or right when you're done, just make it a habit. Go pull your oil dipstick. Normally there's rags right there. You can check it, and then you know if you're low and you got to put it in. So that's heavyweight. So middleweight powertrains like Sportsters. The Street's not involved in that. Well, a Street is middleweight, but it's a different beast because it's water cooled and stuff like that. But like a Sportster, they can consume up to a quart of oil every 1,500 miles. So the mile interval is longer. The strains on the engine are different. They're not moving around as much pressure, things like that'll keep it from consuming oil. But so that's my kind of take on oil consumption. I just stick to what Harley recommends. If it's more than a quart every 1,000, so the test for that is top off your oil, go ride 500 miles, check it. If it's not too low, ride another 500 and check it. If it didn't consume more than a quart, then that's normal consumption. If it's not a quart every 1,000 isn't enough to make the bike smoke or a bunch of soot in the exhaust or anything like that. It's not going to make a plug wet or anything like that. That's enough. It'll burn that off without anyone even noticing. It's not no big deal. So I wanted to mention that only because that's a question that I routinely get. It comes up, a lot in my world. So, my just in closing, my recommendation.
Let's talk about a little bit about what are the takeaways. People want to get information from this. So, the main takeaways. What oil should people be using, and what are some of the biggest things they need to be doing oil wise to make their bike run good and to last, as long as possible.
Check your oil often. Number one, like I said originally.
And get them changed. All your fluids changed every 5,000 miles.
Every 5,000 miles. Stick to the, as close as you can to the factory.
So that's
service
transmission, primary, and engine oil every 5,000 miles.
Every 5,000 miles. So Harley, they do say that their Formula Plus can go 10,000 miles in transmission. But like I was commenting on earlier, those gears are mashing that oil up like really a lot. The contact area and the stresses inside that transmission are pretty large. You're asking a lot of oil to last 10,000 miles doing that. So like I was saying earlier, that's our recommendation. That's what we do in our shop because we meet, quote unquote, or exceed Harley-Davidson's recommendations on service intervals. Check your oil often, change it when you're supposed to change it. Use a high quality oil, your buddy that's, mixing up oils down the street or in his garage or whatever he's doing is probably not the best qualified guy to be making a recommendation to you.
And so just to clarify that, your recommendation is the Harley-Davidson oils, like you mentioned, the Syn 3 in the engine case, and then Formula Plus in the transmission and the primary.
Yep.
And, if you spend more money for the other stuff,
it's not necessarily bad.
It's not bad, but you're maybe not getting the extra benefit per dollar spent.
Yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I know we're gonna get some hate for all those guys would recommend Harley oil because that's what they sell.
Right, we're a Harley store, and people are gonna expect that from us.
But I would encourage those people, go and read these 2 articles. I'm saying the same thing that they said, and these people that wrote these articles are experienced just like me, real world experience. Doing what we do day in and day out.
And what they said is to use the manufacturer's
You can't.
oil.
Their exact statement. I know for sure the Revzilla one says it very clearly. You can't go wrong using what the vehicle manufacturer recommends for oil.
On a lot of levels, I would say too. Like on the level of mechanically and lubrication wise and physically, that's good oil. But also, when it comes to warranty situations and things like that, you're also protecting yourself.
There's never a question. There's no question about it.
You use the Harley stuff.
It's above questioning. There's no, There's no like, oh, well, what oil is that? Who makes it? Is it meant for this vehicle?
Well, let's
like,
look into that oil. Was that the right?
Yeah,
was that the right type of oil for that
application?
Yeah, that application.
And that's where it all goes back to. Really dig into it. Like, what's the engine design and the lubricant that's in it? Was it specifically designed for that application by an engineer, like the people that do these things? I'm not an engineer. Like I said, this is all my opinion. Take it or leave it. We can discuss it if you want to discuss it. We can go deep, and we can go deeper if you want to. But you can go down a rabbit hole on these things and be here all day long. We're already going longer than we already talked about, on the specifics of these things. But go and read those articles, man. They uncover a lot of information that you don't think about on a daily basis, that I don't even think about sometimes, when I'm doing my work. But
those articles, by the way, will be linked in the notes on either and both. I'm going to post this to YouTube, and also our podcast is up, by the way, on Apple Podcasts and any other platform where you typically listen to podcasts. Our podcast has gone live at this point, so look at the notes in the episode, and you'll find those articles that Keith
and
is
I would say,
referencing.
man, the feedback's been great. Like even the fact that Matt and I are sitting across from each other was a recommendation from one guy that I was like, that's a great idea. It'll keep me from not looking at the camera all the time, which I've been trying to pay more attention to. But it's bring it on, bring the questions, bring the comments. We welcome it. We enjoy the feedback. I've enjoyed interacting with the few people that I've interacted with online, trying to answer their questions, and we've emailed back and forth about bars and about engines and all these different things, and that's what I do.
The YouTube comments is a full-time job.
Yeah, right. So I try not to check them too much, just and answer the ones that I think I can answer. Matt's probably versed to answer some of them better than me, but it's great. Yeah, so far the reaction to the first podcast has been great. Hopefully this one will be good too. If you got more questions about oil, you want to talk a little more about it, hit us up, get at us on email or whatever, and we can talk all day long. But I think I talked enough about lubricants and stuff,
you covered some really good topics, and I learned a few things too. So I appreciate that. And guys, if you listen to us on podcast platform, make sure you subscribe to that podcast. Yes. And also rate us. Obviously we appreciate 5 stars, but we also want you to genuinely give us your honest feedback as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. And like we mentioned already, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. We try to get back to everybody. Yeah. But sometimes it gets a little bit daunting when we get too many comments. But let us know your recommendations for future Tech Talk. We've just kind of scratched the surface on picking Keith's brain clean on all the service related items. So let us know what topic you want Keith to cover in the next one. And I think our next episode, we're actually going to have Bob Laidlaw here talking about how he started the dealership and how he started off in the whole Harley-Davidson world. Yeah, we've been talked about that last time too, and we're trying to get to that. And Bob's a busy guy, man. He's got a lot going on, so we got to get him when we can get him. But we got some time scheduled with him, and we'll get it done. But that's cool. Yeah, so. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right, see you next time.